Hi, my name is Chris Clausen. When I'm not running my paint business, playing music, or walking my dog Bob, I'm a yoga teacher. It all started in 2000 when I made a bad jump on a trampoline and broke my lower back. After about a year, I tried yoga as a way to reduce my chronic pain and increase mobility. Over time, I learned it's not just what poses are best for my back, it's how to do them correctly and in a way that's best for my body. Now I'm virtually pain-free and doing things that I never thought possible after my injury. So in 2007, I became a certified Iyengar yoga instructor and have been teaching classes and privately ever since. In each episode of this show, I'll focus on an area of the body and teach you how to do poses that will help you reduce pain, increase mobility, and just feel better. I'm Chris Clausen, and this is The Yoga Show. Hey everybody! My name is Chris Clausen. I am your host for The Yoga Show, the show where we look a little bit more deeply at yoga poses and the people that do them. My special guest student today is Sarah Zika. She's a veterinarian. She works over at Belmont Animal Hospital. She's a regular student over at 12 South. And we're going to work today on poses that are a little bit more advanced. For those of you who have done some yoga for a while, these poses are what are known as inversions, headstand, shoulder stand, these kinds of poses. If you're interested in learning these kinds of things, please stay tuned. We're going to start with some interview and then get into the poses. Stick around. How long have you been a veterinarian?
Oh, since 2008.
Oh, okay.
2008, yeah, I worked in Miami, Florida for a couple of years,
Right.
and then from Nashville, so in 2010, moved back to Nashville and practicing on cats and dogs, a small animal.
Right. Did you like, is it one of those things you knew when you were a kid that you wanted to do, like when you were young?
Good question. Probably not initially. Always had an affinity for pets, cats, dogs,
Right.
rabbits, gerbils, hamsters.
Did you have a lot of them when you were young?
Had a handful.
Did you save them from some horrible? Was there some experience where you did mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on a cat or anything like that?
No. Fortunately, all pretty good experiences
Right.
with the pets growing up.
Okay. So the first pose we're going to work on is handstand, which they call in Sanskrit Adho Mukha Vrikshasana, which means tree pose, downward facing tree pose. I'm going to ask Sarah to come more or less to downward facing dog at the wall. The pose downward facing dog is a great preparation for handstand because the whole upper body from the hips to the hands are more or less what you do in handstand. So again, this is one of the best preparations. And then Sarah's going to come out. The way that we can work on a handstand pose is using support from the wall. So what I have Sarah doing right now, she's sitting at the wall and she's going to actually place her hands where her feet are, just as a measurement. And again, she has her hands placed directly below her shoulders. And here's where the fun comes in. She's going to press her hands into the floor, keeping her arms straight. She's going to begin to walk her feet up the wall. The goal will be for her to open her chest towards the wall. So deepening in the shoulders here. Excellent. So now she's pressing through her hands. She's got her feet at the wall. This is a great preparation. Just doing this is enough. If you want to try to go farther, you keep one leg at the wall and take the other leg up. And Sarah reaches that leg towards the ceiling. And then she's going to take that leg down, just switch. You do not want to try to take both legs away from the wall at the same time. But there it is. She gets that beautiful extension reaching upwards. And then she just takes her feet back to the wall, slowly walks down, rest in child's pose. So again, that's a very good way to practice doing this pose. Comes up. Handstand. Yeah, look good, dude. Okay. Now I'm going to ask Sarah to take her hands again to the floor, only they're going to be a little bit away from the wall. 5 or 6 inches. And you can see also that she has her wrists turned out a little bit. Her fingers are turning out because this actually gives a little bit more space in the shoulders. And then she's going to tuck her toes under and straighten out the legs. And then she starts to walk the feet forwards. Sarah's going to try to get her shoulders directly over her hands. And before even worrying about going up, I'm just going to ask her to just practice kicking up. Take one leg up and let it come on down. Just practice kicking into pose. Don't worry about trying to go up entirely into the pose. But you can see the way Sarah is kicking that aerial leg very strongly, and the down leg is doing a lot of work to help get the momentum up. And I'm going to ask her to change the legs. And it's always good practice to practice with your weaker leg as well, to see you get some of that variation, some of that. And then just rest in child's pose for a few minutes. So you can see Sarah, again, has her arms very well straight and her shoulders directly over her head. She's going to kick on up. That was so nice. Did you see that? Very subtle touch to the walls. Now, her legs are together and she's screeching or scrubbing her heels up the wall. She presses her hands down and gets as long and tall as she possibly can. This can be exceptionally good for the lower back, this pose. Now, when she's coming out of the pose, I want Sarah to keep one leg up and let one leg come down. So she's keeping stable with the aerial leg, and then the other leg leads her down. Then she's just going to come to standing forward bend. Just walk her feet forward, her hands back, and she'll just rest here for a couple of seconds, and then she'll come up. There's just sort of a romance to being a veterinarian.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I mean, I think pets have, especially in Western culture in America, I mean, they have become part of our families, and there are millions of pet lovers out there. So I think when they cross paths with a veterinarian, it's like there's an automatic connection. It's great. I mean, we get to work with all kinds of families and different personalities of pets, and it's a great feeling.
So the next pose we're going to work on is headstand. They call it Shirshasana, which translates to headstand in Sanskrit. We're doing it in the corner, not even just at the wall, but in the corner of a room, because the stability is much better. For those of you who are beginning, you're just starting out, this can be an excellent way to start practicing this pose. So I'm going to have Sarah get into it. And you can see Sarah will go into the corner and she's going to interlace her fingers and take her hands right to the corner of the baseboard and the wall there. And then from there she puts the crown of her head sort of in her hands, and then she's going to tuck her toes under and straighten out the legs. So before Sarah goes any farther, I'm going to ask her to really push her wrists and forearms down to get that stability in the pose so the neck doesn't take too much pressure. And then she walks her feet in, and then she takes both feet off the floor, bends the legs, takes them right to the wall. Yep. And then she takes the legs up. It's important in this pose to get a feeling of lift. So again, Sarah's going to push the forearms down very heavily so her shoulders leave the floor. So there's that very solid base. And then from there, she gets as tall as she can, reaching up all the way through those inner legs and heels. Her legs are very well straight, and her feet, you can see that they're very even and extending upwards. The work of the legs will actually help for the freedom of the neck and the shoulders. Now when she comes out, it's just as important to keep that base solid. So she chops those wrists and forearms down, keeping that base solid, and then she can bend her legs and come out the way that she came in. And that is Shirshasana headstand. Look great.
When we're in surgery, you're hunched over and you're working on a stay, or if you're doing some dental work on a patient, you might be hunched over for a couple hours at a time,
and you can't move, like you have to stay still for a period of time in an awkward position.
Yeah, and it can be taxing and fatiguing and straining. You need to undo that. After the end of the day. Totally.
So the next variation of Shirshasana that we're going to do is the more standard version, balanced in the center of the room. as you can see, the mat is pulled away from the wall, away from the corner, but the approach is going to be very much the same. Sarah's going to take her hands, her wrists, her forearms down to the mat and interlace her fingers all the way to the webbing. And then she comes to the very crown of the head. So when she, theoretically, when she's looking, when her eye gaze is neutral, she's looking directly across the floor, not towards the floor. That means, again, her crown of the head is very much directly on the floor. But as she did before, she's going to tuck the toes under, straighten out those legs. And what's important is to get the base of the pose very solid. Very, very solid. So she pushes those forearms down. As she's pushing the forearms down, she's taking her middle back, her upper back in as she walks her feet forward. And then when she's ready, she feels balanced, keeping the base solid, she goes up into the pose. Now once you're in the pose, Shirshasana, the work needs to happen again, where the forearms are pressing down strongly so the shoulders keep drawing away from the floor. And you can see Sarah has a very good alignment where her feet are directly over her knees are over her hips are over her shoulders. She's got a very good straight line, and that's what you want to try to go for in this pose, Shirshasana. And the idea to keep the pose light and to keep pressure off of the neck is to keep the legs extending up towards the ceiling very strong. This pose, you don't need to stay in it for too terribly long. Those of you who are more experienced, you might want to try for endurance. But in this case, I'm just going to ask Sarah to repress the forearms down strongly before she moves out of the pose. She comes out by bending her legs and then taking her feet to the floor. And again, once you're down, you can just rest in child's pose. Keep the head down for a few moments and resting here. This is standard Shirshasana, standard headstand. Good job, look good. Like when you get home from work, you're not going to class. Like when you do get yourself to practice a little bit, what are the first poses you might go to?
Down dog.
Right.
I mean, it's just a classic. It stretches you out in a way that is just different than all the other poses, from your head to your feet. So that's just a nice, and it's intense but calming at the same time, at least for me. I mean, it might take a bit to get to that calming stage, but it'll come. So down dog for sure. I mean, even if it's just Urdhva-Hastasana, standing with my arms up, just to get that elevation, stretch your back, stretch your spine, stretch your arms. It's not a position that you're in very often, so just trying to get that length and stretch, that's kind of a nice one.
The next pose we're going to work on is Sarvangasana, also known as shoulder stand. This can be one of the most beneficial poses, not just physically, but also physiologically and emotionally. The name of this pose, Sarvangasana, does not mean shoulder stand, it means whole body pose, or all aspects pose, which is to say, this pose is beneficial to all aspects of the body, mind, and spirit. As you can see, we have these supports here. The stacking of the blankets, the arrangement of the mat, and the support and the wall. All these things are set up as a way to protect you and your neck. There are many other variations of this pose. Maybe you've seen other people doing this pose directly on the floor. And you'll understand once we get into the pose maybe why we use these supports, because it protects the neck and it protects the shoulders. So I'm going to ask Sarah to come on in. She's going to come to lying down on the supports. You can see her hips are on the bolster. She comes to lying down, taking her feet to the wall, and then she adjusts herself so her head is on the ground, and her shoulders are just a couple of inches away from this edge of these blankets that we've set up. And again, this stack of blankets is set up here as a way to keep you from overstretching the back of the neck. So as she lies here, she's going to roll her outer shoulders into the floor, she bends her legs, takes her feet to the wall, lift the hips up a little bit, and then rewraps those outer shoulders even more. The trick is to get as much of the flesh of the outer shoulders as you can underneath you, and then she's going to take her hands to her back, supporting her back with her hands. She pushes her feet into the wall and takes the tailbone, her hips a little bit more towards the center of the room. And now I'm going to ask Sarah to come to the tips of the toes. So we're getting closer to this more vertical stack. She pushes the tailbone in, pushing her hands into her back. And this is as far as we're going to go on this first variation. For some of you who have never done this pose, this is plenty for you to start in, just getting accustomed to the shape and the feeling of the pose. From here, I'm going to ask Sarah to take her hand from her back and just begin to walk her feet back down the wall, letting her hips rest. For those who want to go farther, who want to get closer to the more classic version of the pose, Sarvangasana, we're going to continue on as we did before. Sarah, again, is going to walk her feet up the wall, take her hips off the floor, and take her hands to her back. You can see she's being very thorough in getting the outer shoulders to roll underneath her, getting the flesh of the outer arms strongly underneath her, and her hands are firm on her back. Now she again comes to the very tips of the toes to try to get more of the body over the shoulders. As we did when we were working on handstand, just trying with one leg, I'm going to ask Sarah just to take one leg up. She takes that leg up and she reaches it towards the ceiling, and again, using the leg to motivate, lengthen the spine. And then I'm going to ask her to switch legs. She takes her other leg up, extends it towards the ceiling, as if someone's there pulling this leg up to get that sense of extension and land. Good. Up. And now, for those of you who think that's good practice enough, that's fine. If you want to try to balance, as Sarah does, she's going to take one leg off and then the other leg, and come to the more classic version of the pose. Sarvangasana, shoulder stand. You can see she has a very good alignment. Again, her feet are directly over her knees are directly over the hips are directly over the shoulders. A very straight line, shoulder stand, so the weight of the body does go in the shoulders, not in the head. You can also see that the face is quite relaxed, even though the legs are quite active. And again, you want to create this sense that you're being pulled up by the legs. The legs should be doing work, and the legs should get tired before anything else does in this pose. The benefits of this pose are innumerable. I could go on for quite a while on all of the benefits of this pose. And quite frankly, it would be nothing bad for Sarah because it's very good to stay in this pose. It's very beneficial to remain in this pose for a longer period of time. But as I said before, the pose is not just good for the body, but it's also very good for the nervous system. Very, very good for bringing fresh arterial blood to the brain, as well as to the thyroid, again, the parathyroid glands that regulate the release of the adrenals and other hormones of the body. When she comes out, when Sarah's coming out, she keeps her hands firm on her back, and she's going to bend one leg at a time, find the wall with that one foot. Once she finds the wall, she feels safe enough to take the other leg down, and then she comes out of the pose the way that she came in, letting the hips drop. As we did in the last pose, she's going to push her feet into the wall, slide back until her shoulders come to the ground, and then she's just going to cross her legs and rest here.
I find with a lot of the poses, which we may end up talking about too, is not necessarily doing the pose. Well, it can be enjoyable. Sometimes it's the effects that you get after that makes the pose worth doing, because it puts you in a better place,
right?
Physically and emotionally, and all of that.
Totally. So another great variation of this pose, shoulder stand, can be done using a chair, just your standard folding chair, or even a chair you have in your kitchen will work fine. And you can see also I have these blankets set up. You can use your towels or your blankets at home are fine. If you have a yoga mat, it does help to have it on the seat for a little bit more comfort. But I'm going to ask Sarah to sit sideways on the chair. And then she's going to swing her legs up over the back of the chair. And then from here, she's going to begin to lie back. You can see that her hips remain on the seat of the chair. And she works on bringing her shoulders down to the blankets. So the position is very similar to that last pose, to the other variation of shoulder stand, where the head is on the floor, but the shoulders are supported, so there's not as much strain happening on the neck. Now I'm going to ask Sarah to take her arms between the legs of the chair and grab the back legs if she can. If it's difficult to grab the insides, you can take her on the outsides. That's fine too. But then from here, she takes her feet to the back of the chair to start. Adjusts a little bit, get her hips a little bit more balanced, and then from here, she's going to take her legs up. So you can see this is, again, another variation of this pose, shoulder stand, where the hips are quite supported. This is a more, what we call a restorative version of this pose. For those of you who might have difficulty doing the more complete non-supported variation, that this is a very good way to go. And again, this is one of those poses where a longer stay can be quite good and quite beneficial. You can see that Sarah's feet, as they were before in the other poses, are directly over the hips. For a second, Sarah, take your feet over your face. This happens quite often, and the truth is what happens is a strain occurs in the neck, in the back of the head, when the feet come over out of plane. So when she gets those feet more directly over the hips, it in fact releases the shoulders a little bit more, helps you find more space there. One of the things that is described in this pose and all variations of Sarvangasana is that if you have been ill or sick for a long period of time, regular practice in this pose will help you find your energy again. It's also exceptionally good for the lungs. If you have chest breathing problems or lung problems, this pose can be exceptionally good because you're upside down. You're flushing out the lungs. When Sarah comes out of the pose, she comes out more or less the way that she came in. She's going to bend her legs, find the back of the chair with her feet. Once you do that, it gives you that better sense of where you are. You'll feel a little bit more secure. She can release her hands. And then she slides out of the pose. Her hips are now going to be where her blankets are. And her head and shoulders are going to rest on the floor. And she can just let her calves rest on the seat of the chair.
It just gives you really kind of some coping skills, I think, and
Yes.
managing skills that are a little bit subtle, but they're there. And if you can take some of that, in your classroom experience and apply it to real world, kind of every day. I mean, that's something I try to be conscientious of. And
I often say this in class, that the poses are not comfortable and they're not necessarily meant to be. It's the idea that we're trying to find comfort in the discomfort, and that makes us better at dealing in that discomfort in the real world, which we often. So the next pose we're going to work on is legs up the wall pose. You can see that Sarah is sitting on a bolster. You don't need, if you're at home, you can just get a couple of towels, get a few folded up blankets, just something to raise you up a little bit off of the floor. And you can see also that Sarah is sitting sideways on the bolster with one side of her body to the wall. Now, I'm going to ask the mistake that, and you can even demonstrate the mistake. The mistake is that people fly back and try to get into the pose, and it does not work that way. The correct way is to lie sideways. She lies down sideways, and you can see she's moving her hips closer and closer to the wall to the point where the butt just barely touches. And then she rolls onto the back and takes her legs up. And she can make the refining adjustments, pulling herself a little closer to the wall, or pulling the bolster, whatever support. Again, if it's a blankets or towels, you can pull them a little closer. But the goal is to get the hips well supported and slightly higher than the chest. Have the legs straight. And you can see Sarah's legs are quite actively straight. They're not passive and falling out to the sides. This integrity, this awareness of the legs, actually feeds into more release in the area of the hips. The name of this pose in Sanskrit is not legs up the wall pose. It's Viparita Karani, which means inverted lake pose. And the image is that we're changing the direction of the fluids of the body. This can be very, very good for you. It's very good for the heart, good for the nervous system. You can see that Sarah's in this position, again, where her head is below her heart, her chest is open. I would recommend a longer stay in this pose. After a long day of work, this can be an excellent pose just to get yourself into and stay. It's very good for the legs. When you are done, as Sarah will do, she's going to take her feet to the wall and just push the feet into the wall and slide herself more away from the wall until her hips come to the ground. And then she's just going to cross her legs and let them rest on the support. This is a very nice way to come out of the pose. It's very low impact, easing your way out. But I will emphasize, after you stay here for a minute or two, that you change, watch Sarah as she switches the cross of the legs, so that the hips release evenly. And then when she comes out, she takes her feet to the floor, rolls to the side, and come up. And that is a Viparita Karani, legs up the wall pose. So continuing on with our discussion of the yamas, the universal ethical disciplines, the first of the Ashtanga, the 8 limbs or 8 aspects of yoga, we're going to talk about asteya, which means non-stealing, and aparigraha, which means non-coveting. When we practice asteya, not stealing, it's important to understand that it's not just the physical stuff. That you can very easily steal someone's sense of self or someone's sense of confidence in what you say. The practice of aparigraha, non-coveting, doesn't just mean this not coveting what someone else has. It also means not being rigid in our thinking. It means that we want to try to be a little bit more flexible, not just physically, but in our minds and in our willingness to experience the world around us. The interesting thing about asteya and aparigraha, this practice of not stealing and not coveting, is that when we begin to really cultivate these things in ourselves, paradoxically, we end up receiving more. So as always, thank you for watching the Yoga Show. I would also like to thank our special guest student, Sarah Zika, for coming by and doing some poses with us. In future episodes, we're going to be on a construction site. We're going to be in a hotel room looking at different ways to do poses for people in the construction field, people who do a lot of traveling. Please stay tuned for the Yoga Show on future episodes. Until then, stay tuned.
Warm sand and sunshine.